right, here we go. Overdrive, off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker, and up on TSN 4. Bryan Hayes, the O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill, and there he is, the man himself, the Strud Muffin himself. The oven is jacked to 450. Jason Strudwick with us for the afternoon.
Man, crank that oven up. Where's the heat hotter, Struddy? Is it in Toronto or is it in oil country? Wow.
Well, after last night or before last night, I would have thought it was in Edmonton, but you see that game last night. Oh, man, I can imagine. The text machine is on fire today, and I love it. It's like this. The world willed for me to be here today after that performance last night.
You're right.
Hey, you know what? As much as I don't get too jacked up about worrying about the playoff results, I've also learned that I don't get too jacked up until I see about 12 or 15 games on either side. But instead of Strut or Dud, maybe we'll play a little who would you take? Do you want to take the Oil or the Leafs totals for the points of the season? Do you want their goaltenders? Do you want their top scorer? I'll give you guys an option maybe for Strut or Dud.
I love it. I love that. Strut or Dud coming up. Lots of different opportunities to either Strut or Dud. And you're right, Strutty, in terms of the pulse in the city, always being much more calculated, and he's waiting another, 4 to 6 to 8 games. I don't get the impression like Leaf fans are willing to do that. But there was an Edmonton angle. That Philip Broberg looked good last night. Man, did he look good playing for the Blues last night. That's got to be a kick in the pills for other fans.
Are people going to start ripping the Oil for not signing that guy if he continues to play well? I mean, it's natural that they would, but when he was let go, I was like, I wouldn't imagine that either. But the guy looks pretty good. Is it like, when are people going to go nuts about that guy in Edmonton, Struddy?
Well, they're starting to get a little antsy, and you know what? Any team would be, right? You look at it. Let's look at what he's done, right? He had a really good month in the playoffs last year. Mm-hmm. He's a very good skater, and now the reality is, when he was signed to the offer sheet by St. Louis, most of the people that are NHL fans would have said, who and why, right? But now we're starting to see he's getting more ice time. He's playing regularly in the second pairing. He's playing his left side, a spot that with the Oilers he wouldn't have had because they have kind of 3 left side defensemen. And he's making the most of it. And then you got Dylan Holloway, who, by the way, had 2 goals last night as well. Mm-hmm. So, those 2 guys are a good start. And then you've got Jesse Puljujärvi in Pittsburgh, who's doing pretty well. He's almost at a point a game. It's like, and the Oilers aren't doing well. If they're doing well, no one talks about it. But they're struggling, so everyone's talking about it, right? It's kind of it's a perfect storm if you're an Oilers fan.
Exactly the way it operates, man. It really is amazing. The mirror is like somewhere on the Saskatchewan-Manitoba border. It's like halfway between Toronto and Edmonton, because the heat is turned up, in both cities. And listen, the Leafs, that was a bad game. I mean, that's back-to-back bad games against teams that you should be in a position to beat. You're not going to beat all the time. But the Columbus game was particularly bad, and I thought last night it was a fairly equal effort to what we saw a couple of nights prior. And what I think made it sting that much more is that there was such a buildup that Craig Berube was going up against his former team. And sometimes I guess players buy into that, sometimes they don't. You're not going to win them all. Sheldon Keefe lost against the Leafs a couple of weeks ago when he played his former team. But they didn't show up for him last night. Like, they can talk all they want about, we love Craig's here, we respect Craig. And that all may be true, probably is true. But that effort that the big boys in particular put forward last night did not suggest that they showed up at that rink saying, we got to amend what happened in Columbus, but furthermore, we got to step up for our new coach, because that was ugly again last night. Like, the big boys in particular, man, I thought Matthews and Marner and Nylander just kind of sleepwalking through that game. And
crazy the comments after the game in Columbus where they're like, we stunk, and we got to atone for it, throw it in the garbage, get ready for the next one. And it's so brutal when you just think to join out the next one, too. It's just like, what were all those comments about? And I understand this happens. We all do. But just the circumstances under it where it's like, got beat to pucks, our big boys didn't play well, we weren't physical, we didn't do this, goaltending. Let's be serious, the goaltending has been, like, they didn't get a save the last 2 games. But I don't think they had a chance to win even if Stolarz was at his best in net, man.
Right. That wasn't Joseph Wall's fault last night. He's not the reason they lost, but he wasn't that good.
No.
Based on his standards. And he made a couple of big stops to keep it a 2-goal game at some point, late first, early second. But, yeah, he was just okay. He wasn't great. And I just think you got to come back to the big players first and foremost when you're reviewing what's happened over the last 2 games. And the fact that now they're 8 games in and they're 4-4, which is not a massive issue. It's not sky is falling, but it's not great. You're off to a routine start, which is something they've done a lot in the past. But I think Austin Matthews has to be at the forefront of this because the core 4 has been kind of a shield for all of these guys individually. And they've all had their different moments where they've had to walk the carpet and go out there and answer for the way they've been playing or performing or negotiating or whatever it happens to be. But he's the highest paid player in the league. They made him the captain. He's their best player. He's their leader. He's the guy. And through 8 games, he really has not had one of those nights where he's popped. He's played fine. He's played really well defensively at times, killing penalties. And I think there might be an explanation for all this because it is a new role, the captaincy, a new coach. There's a number of things that may be factoring in, and it's early. And I'm certainly not expecting that he won't break out of it. He certainly will at some point, ideally tomorrow night in Boston. But you're the man. You're the guy. You're the leader. You're the captain. You've been in the league. This is your 9th year. And the team played really poorly, and he was at the forefront of it against Columbus. And last night, I did not see anything at Austin Matthews that would suggest that was anywhere close to his A game.
No.
Yeah.
And he's got to stand alone, and then everyone else can filter in terms of taking heat because that's what comes with wearing the crown, and he wears the crown in Toronto.
There's no doubt about it. But listen, I think that what Craig Berube is trying to bring in is a little bit, a harder game where it's more predictable. And there was 2 plays last night. So they just showed the Broberg goal. Marner doesn't take away the pass to the D-man, nor is he in the shooting lane. And that's not Craig Berube hockey. I'm sorry. You look at the way the Blues are still playing, even though he's gone. They're in a shooting lane or they're taking away that pass. And then you got William Nylander, who's a really offensive player. He's the last man back, I guess, other than the D-man, because McCabe goes in. And he's trying to beat someone just inside the blue line, Jake Neighbors. And, that's not Craig Berube hockey. There's another play there, and we could talk about being more or less skilled play, but he sees he's being pressured high. Just chip it. Just chip it behind Neighbors, and you can skate around and get it, or your buddy can get it. The risk versus reward there. So even if he does beat him, what is behind that? Is that a breakaway behind Neighbors? No. There's still another layer of St. Louis Blues that you have to get through. So I think if I'm Berube, that's where I'm really like, guys, these are the plays I'm talking about. These are the ones that it's not a huge risk for a huge reward. That's a small reward for a massive risk for a forward to make that play when his D-men's jumped in.
You wonder what it's going to take for them to totally get the message. Is it going to be sitting a Mitch Marner on the bench? Because let's be real here. I know in this market, and nobody's very patient, and it was 2 brutal games, but they're trying to change the way that they've done things. And I think in anything in life, if you're trying to change something, like we're talking about an overhaul, a different way of doing things, whether it be going to the gym or Struddy, if you want to get a different hairline, it takes time, right? It takes time. It is. It's an investment. You got to get on a bird. You got to go to Turkey. You got to go through the whole process. Right. And it just doesn't happen overnight. So I think there's situations like those 2 plays that Struddy just mentioned where Craig Berube's looking at that saying, this is the stuff that you guys have been trying to get away with for so long. And it's probably the reason you end up never winning in critical situations is because you pull this nonsense. But how is he going to stop them from doing that? You mentioned not in the passing lane, not in the shooting lane. So it's like, what are you going to do to Mitch about that? You're going to show him some tape and say, hey, don't ever do that again? Will he cost one up with the blue? It's like they're so used to doing it and they're so good that they pull it off most of the times too. But to get everything out of the game, I'm sure it's going to be a transition. But in saying
I'm not sure
that,
it can fully happen. Do you believe? How much can you really Craig Berube affect Matthews, Marner, Nylander in terms of the way that they operate on the ice?
Great question. I don't know. Probably.
But
What
they
do
have
you
to
think the
decide.
answer is? 0?
Well, I mean, I think it can. I think 5%. I don't know. In certain areas, like we're referencing here, these are very acute areas of the ice. You know, the Nylander turnover. That's Marchand and Montgomery on the bench. It's the same thing. Trying to make a play at the opposing blue line, and it ends up in your net. You know, it's the exact same thing that happened to a great player in Boston, a veteran player who's won before. So guys like that, they're gonna try to do different things. But you know, going north, being more physical, leaning on a forecheck, leaning on a cycle, going to ugly areas, that's just not the DNA of these guys. It's not who they are. It's not how they're built. You know, so I don't know how much Berube can affect that. I don't know if anybody can, really, to get them to play quote-unquote Craig Berube hockey. I don't know how much you can really expect.
But I'll tell you who has to change it. It's them. Those players have to decide that it's like enough. It's enough. We want to, and not the game last night or not. I'm talking about the early exits from the playoffs. Mm-hmm. When you watch that Florida Panthers team, how many highlight reel goals did they score in their four rounds of the playoffs? I would suggest, if any, there was maybe one. Very, very few.
Yep.
And that is not what wins. What wins is predictable hockey that continues the puck going forward. And I'm not talking about unskilled, because I think so many times people are like, oh, these people are talking about taking the scale of the game.
Yeah.
No.
Barkov is skilled. Barkov is skilled.
100%. And yeah, you might lose a little off your top end for points, but you get way more points because you play more games. Right, so I think it has to come from those guys where they decide. So that's why I think right now they're fighting a little bit for the reason you just mentioned. There's a lot of change, and it's not the way we've done it. So their default position is doing what they've always done. So
and
Craig
Yeah.
He's very stubborn. He'll push them, I think.
He knows it has to happen in order for it to work.
And there's a happy medium, guys. You can have both. We saw it in some of their best games. Physical, hardworking. And guess what they had? They had a ton of offensive opportunities.
Right.
You can have it both ways. You can have your cake and eat it too. It's like those games where they were the better team by far. There wasn't just one or the other. It was a combination. So that's the only evidence you have to show these guys why it's important to do it. Look at the games where you outplayed the opponent.
Like Tampa.
Exactly. Overwhelm them. It's like get on them, hit them, force them out of the game, and you get chances. It doesn't have to be only one way. You can be physical, can be strong on pucks, and you can also be creative. And once you get the puck and you dominate a team, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. It's got to be both. It's not one way or the other, or Craig Berube's way. It's a combination of all the things that make a quality hockey team, like the Florida Panthers, as Struddy just mentioned.
Yeah. And that's, I think been evident, been clear, and that's why you get the fans who, are on edge with this team. Like, let's call it what it is. Like, there's an edge in the market. There's an edge in the fan base. And some guy threw a jersey on the ice last night, which I was a bit surprised by. It's not they make the playoffs every year. But listen, I'm not going to challenge any fan on them being angry or bitter or whatever, because one thing that is pretty consistent with this team is apathy generally doesn't kick in. It's usually anger. It is maybe a short fuse. And I think this organization, the franchise, very lucky that fans reset every year. They kind of reset every year, and they force optimism. And a large part of that is because no one wants to miss the magical ride if and when it happens. You've been a fan for 40 years or 50 years. You're not going to leave. You've invested that much time, because when you leave, the most leafy thing ever would be that's when they win. When you stop riding the wave and stop putting emotion into it and time and effort and, money and all this kind of stuff that comes with being a Leaf fan. So you don't want to miss that. And what you get every single year is you get forced optimism from a lot of fans. And some of it's natural. Some fans are just naturally optimistic all the time. It's a large fan base in Toronto and Edmonton, all these Canadian cities, the great sports towns. That's what comes with it. But there's a chunk of the fan base that forced the optimism, and they did so unwillingly, but they did it because they want to believe. And it took 2 games for them to say, I knew it. I can't do it. I'm getting angry here. 2 games, Columbus and St. Louis. And you can call it crazy, But there is
I think it is crazy. Like, I've seen everything, and I know there's probably heartache down the road, Hayes, but that's just crazy. We're 8 games in.
But it's not 8 games, though. It's a continuation of Game 7 into Game 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way through 82.
But if after every loss we're going to just attach it to a Game 7 loss, that's insanity.
Listen,
are we going to do that? Like, every game,
I'm
every
not saying
loss?
we're going to do that. I'm just telling
you
what fans are. I can tell you, you know it. You talk to Leaf fans all the time. I'm getting texts from a million people. We're seeing it online. People turn because they're like, I'm trying to be optimistic. I love that Tampa game. And then look what happened here. I knew it. Which, again, is maybe an unstable approach. But I'm not here to tell you to change your mind. Because, again, what's happened collectively since the Boston series was, hey, look at Craig Berube, he's here. Hey, it's Tanev and Ekman Larson, and Stolarz is in net. And hey, look at this Steven Lorentz. And you know what happens when they lose in the way they played the last 2 games? It becomes Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, Riley's issue again. That's what Leaf fans come back to, is those 5 guys are still here. And they've been here the whole time, and it makes it tough. It's tough for them. I'm sure it's a grind because they know that. They got to talk on it all the time. And that's what's been noticeable after 2 games, the amount of Leaf fans that are on edge. And they're like, what are we doing here? And yet you would think you'd understand they're going to figure this out and make the playoffs because they're a really good team.
Yes, that's what's going to happen. I understand both points. Do I think after 2 games saying, here we go again is insane? Yes, I do. Yeah. I just literally think it's ridiculous. They played a stretch of games last year at the beginning of the season where I looked at them and I'm like, I don't even know if this team's any good. But they ended up getting 102, 105 points?
102 points.
102
that's
points.
What's frustrating.
Yeah.
Is that
I also do understand where the heartaches of the past, and you mentioned the reason of the fans' behavior is because of the scar tissue every year, and it happens year after year. But if you're just going to connect that to every single game and every single loss, I don't know what the hell kind of way is that to live? And I get it, you love the Leafs, you love sports, and it means a lot, but how it's going to play out is how it's going to play out. What the hell? What kind of way to live is that? Here we go again. We're heartbroken again after 2 losses. What is going on here?
It's challenging, but it's a reality.
Well, Leafs fans live the same way that Hayes does when he goes golfing. He takes a trip on the first hole, then he's done, right? He can't mentally recover. And that's where he's at. And I'm probably in the same boat, but this is what I think. When I look at this group, there's going to be off nights, right? There's going to be some of the games you just don't have it, but it's sometimes the way you lose, right? So you're trying to do the right things and trying to do the right things away from the puck, like just those 2. Well, one was with the puck, but not to keep picking on those 2 guys, but they're the ones that are on top of my head. Mm-hmm. So am I trying to do the right thing without the puck and with the puck more often than not? And when they have success, they do. When they lose, they don't. So you got to try to minimize that so that make the other team earn their goals. Make it hard for them to get their goals.
And for the most part, they've done that, Strud. What about just a big picture, like smart approach or assessment? Played 7 games. 2 of the 7 were trash. Like, that's what we're talking about here.
And low, but it's pretty small sample size.
They're 4-4.
Yeah, so you're talking about
8 games, 2 have been
25%. Right. So now let's see what happens Saturday, right? Do they bounce back and get back to the core? Because you don't change overnight. And that's, I think, my point is that don't expect these guys to be perfect 10 games deep. You want to keep getting better and bringing whatever Craig wants to bring to their game. Have it ready for game 83. Because what they've done every other year into game 83 hasn't worked, except for once, I guess. They beat Tampa. So to me, you want to get 102 points. They want to win the division. Maybe that changes this year if they win the division rather than finishing 2nd or 3rd or whatever. But their game has to be adjusted for playoff hockey. And that's what I'm looking at. So 2 tough games. Yeah, people lose games. I get it. But is it ready for game 83? We won't know that, unfortunately, for whatever it is, 6 months.
Well, and that's the other side of it. Like, if you're not going to react to regular season games, what do you want people to do? Just sit there and say, wake me up in April? I mean, that's not going to happen either. People are going to ride the wave of a regular season. There's ups and downs, and you're right, though, Struddy. I mean, I think that's a sensible view that, it's going to take some time. But again, there's 2 separate conversations with this team and with the organization. It's the 5 players who have been here for the longest time, make all the money, and are the best players, and then everything else. And it's like there's two separate conversations, and really it's about those guys changing. Those guys changing, and those guys playing differently over the course of the year, not one night against St. Louis or 1 week against St. Louis and Columbus. That's not the point. Yet also keeping intact what they're capable of doing, which is being game breakers and world-class players. And, you're going to need Austin Matthews to score a lot of goals to win. You need Mitch Marner to put up a lot of points. And William Nylander, you can talk like it's two separate conversations. They got to play smarter, they got to play wiser, they got to be bigger, they got to be tougher, they got to play north-south, blah, blah, blah. And then the brass tacks of it is you got to score, and you got to help this team win. It's a top-heavy league. There's not a lot of depth in the league. A lot of it is who are your 5 or 6 best forwards, 3 or 4 best defensemen? Who'd you pay? And those guys got to do it. And these guys know that. And Berube knows it, and Trey Living knows it. It's a long season. It's a long ride. But again, I think what can be frustrating is you're not going to win or lose a division or what have you in October, but now you're 4-4, and it felt like you were moving towards something and feeling a little bit different. And this is very Sheldon Keefe like. That's kind of what it feels like. Decent start, not bad, kind of easing into look at Marner. Marner's a great example of that. Notoriously slow starter. Slow start again. Contract year. Kept hearing all summer how working out with McKinnon and Sid and on fire. I haven't noticed him much through 8 games.
It's been very average or even
very
below
average.
That. Yeah,
just kind of easing into the year.
Yeah, that one. I think that moment against Pittsburgh where he had that goal, but then other than that, it's you don't really know. You haven't noticed them. That's just the truth of it.
But they're thinking. I believe that when a coach is trying to tweak the way you're playing, you're thinking a lot, and you're not just reacting. So
I'm not buying that though, man. Me and you weren't exactly Gretzky Curry, but when a coach said, "Hey, we're going to switch something here. Let's just adapt on the fly." How hard is it, for crying out loud, man? I continue to say the best league in the world. You should be able to switch what you're doing in a period by period and be smart enough to understand how to do it.
Yeah, but we both know that doesn't exist, right? That doesn't happen all the time. Like I had to, because if I didn't, there was a lineup of 12 guys behind me that would do it. So I had to be that way. Whereas sometimes other guys they don't feel that that level of stress for them to play every night. So you don't have to do it. But I do feel that when you are tested, when you're under pressure, that's when you go default to whatever it was, whether it's your golf swing, your hockey play, your tennis, whatever it is. You always go back to it. So that he has to somehow change that. So their default is the way he wants them to play all the time.
And I'm sure he's hammering away at that. Like today, they had sounds like a tough practice, and they got a big roadie coming up. They're in Boston tomorrow and Winnipeg on Monday. And Boston hasn't been playing great. They just lost again. Tampa lost again. And that's kind of the interesting part of the shuffle here early on, is that Florida just continues to roll. They won again last night, and it's early, but
no Barkov.
Yeah, exactly. Barkov's banged up, and they're still doing it. They signed Verhaeghe. They're going to sign Bennett. They re-signed Maurice. And they're like, let the rest of the division just figure out whatever they want to figure out. We're just going to keep rolling here. And we're the pace cars.
Winnipeg is no tap-in on Monday.
And Winnipeg is not a tap-in on Monday.
I saw them live, was it 2 weeks ago? Mm-hmm. They are a good team. And they've got goaltending. And Lowry, that third line with Lowry, might be the best third line in the league. That guy is heavy and hard. And, oh, man, I love the way he plays. Yeah,
and that's it, man. Like, it comes at you quick. And that's what a couple of games early in the year can do for you. Because, again, coming off the Tampa game, Leafs are 4-2, looking great. People are loving it. And then 2 poor games in a row, and you're like, man, you better get one here in Boston and Winnipeg. You got to figure it out here starting tomorrow night. Mike Johnson will join us just after 5 o'clock. We'll get his take on this. Strutter Dud is coming up today. We have Strutter Dud locked in and dialed down. We do have Dear Hazy B coming up in a couple of hours. And the World Series is finally upon us here. Finally arrived. A lot of people buzzing about all the events in L.A. tonight, like traffic, as if they don't live in that existence all the time in LA.
Yeah, we'll come here for a couple of weeks and see
what
this dump is like.
Come here and check out what we're operating with. We don't have any teams doing anything. We get no concerts, nothing. and yet it's bedlam here, and I'll bet you it's smoother in L.A. But Eric Hosmer coming up. We've had Eric on before. He's a blast to talk baseball with. His take on what he expects in the World Series. Ohtani versus Judge. Who does he think has had a better year? There's a lot to get into with Eric. So we'll tee up the World Series with Eric Hosmer. We got Luke coming off a big win for Hayes and Bro last night. Owen Wilson picking another loser. Man, you guys are ice cold right now.
Dude, I'm not even familiar with the selection because I was working. What did he do last night?
He was on mini. You laid the points. Vikings Sam Darnold on a short week on the road. Not good. And we'll have more picks and more chatter on the NFL Week 8 later this afternoon. Struddy's in here. Jason Strudwick with the O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill. I'm Bryan Hayes. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. Overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Mike Johnson in about a half an hour. Strud or Dud in about an hour. And Eric Hosmer will join us here in a moment. World Series champ, and he knows these two teams very well. Judge versus Ohtani, Yankees, Dodgers, New York, L.A. It doesn't get any bigger than this tonight. And with all of the chatter about, the stars and the offense and everything, Garrett Cole's on the mound tonight.
Oof.
And I feel like this is a big, big moment for him. And, he's won before. He is a winner. He's a great, great arm.
Dude, he's the ultimate X factor. He could get in there 3 times, maybe.
Exactly.
And if he can be dialed in 3 times, that's a difference maker in the series.
That's what I'm saying. Like, Flaherty's, starting for the Dodgers tonight. But if you get Cole in, if you can get him in game 1, game 4, game 7 with the off days.
And he's dialed.
And he's dialed in. This sets up for some pretty magical stuff. And naturally, we're all talking Ohtani. We're all talking Judge and Soto and, Betts, etc. But I feel like Garrett Cole, he's kind of lurking in the weeds right now. And he's going to have a serious impact on how this series plays out. And here he is, longtime MLBer, World Series champ, host of the Diggin Deep podcast, back on Overdrive. There's Eric Hosmer. What's up, Eric?
How we doing, fellas? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're doing great, man. It feels like an eternity since we had baseball. What do you make of the build-up? Like, it's been a while since we've seen a game here.
Yeah, it has. I tell you what, but the anticipation for this matchup, every fan of baseball cannot wait. The Yankees, Dodgers, the 2 big market teams, the superstar, star-studded rosters. So many storylines you can build around. It's going to be a hell of a series.
Yeah, Brian really just mentioned the pitching with Cole going up there. Like, what do you make of these playoffs? Is this like Judge Ohtani, what team can hit the most bombs, or is it what pitcher can give 5 solid innings and then get the hell off the mound? Like, what is this matchup? What's going to happen here? Who's going to win?
Yeah, I tell you what, man, I go back and forth in this matchup all the time. Ultimately, I got the Dodgers winning. I think when you look at comparison both, compare the pitching, the Yankees have better starting pitching. The Dodgers bullpen has been carrying them throughout the postseason. The Dodgers, in my opinion, have a better lineup. The Yankees have some superstars with Soto and Judge, and obviously Giancarlo Stanton's been doing his thing. But ultimately, in my opinion, it just, Shohei Ohtani is a different level of superstar. Mookie Betts as well. The Yankees, in my opinion, to get here, have not played clean baseball, and I think they have a lot to clean up. And I think it's too much to clean up to get over the Dodgers. So I got the Dodgers winning this in 7 games, and just 7 games because I think it's going to be an entertaining series, and I wanted to go 7 for baseball's sake.
The fans would love that. So you just touched on those 3 monsters for the Yankees. How do they go about managing pitch selection and stuff for those 3 guys that can do so much damage?
Yeah, I tell you what, the beginning of the postseason, I was completely wrong on this because I would not have gave Aaron Judge a pitch to hit the whole postseason. Now, Soto and Stanton have been doing a big load of carrying that offense, and Stanton especially. Big homer after big homer. He was down in the lower end of the lineup, 5-6 hole in the beginning of the postseason. Now he's protecting Judge, but at the end of the day, Aaron Judge, the career that he's had, the numbers that he's put up these last couple of years, you feel like he's due to go off here pretty soon in the World Series. So I can see Aaron Judge doing what he can to carry this Yankee offense, but at the end of the day, I just think the Dodgers are too good, and Shohei Ohtani is too big of a superstar.
Well, you mentioned the Yankees, they haven't been playing clean baseball. They have to clean stuff up. Explain that. What is it that you think they have to clean up here?
Yeah, so the first series against the Royals, game one, the Royals walked 8 guys. The Yankees ended up winning that game by 1 run. They should have won that game by way more runs. You look at the Cleveland series, Cleveland did a lot of mistakes in the field. Defensively, they made about 2 or 3 errors a game, it seemed like, kept giving the Yankees extra outs, extra life. And then the Yankees themselves on the bases, they've made a lot of bad base running mistakes. Defensively, they've had a lot of mistakes as well. So that's where, in my opinion, if the Yankees had to go through the National League side and play the Mets and play the Padres the way that they played all the way up until the World Series, I don't see them beating those teams. So that's where I think ultimately there's just too much to clean up for them to beat this Dodger team.
You mentioned Ohtani and being that, like, he's just the next level of everything. Does that mean, like, former players like yourself, guys in Major League Baseball, do they just look at this guy and say, like, what the hell is this guy all about? He's that good where he just makes everybody, like, drool and their jaw drops when they put eyes on him? Because when you're in the big leagues, it's great. Not many times are you like, what the hell's going on? What is this guy all about?
Yeah, he is that good. And it's kind of one of those things where when you heard about him playing in Japan, coming over to the big leagues, he's going to pitch, he's going to hit. You kind of think as a player, you're like, man, there's no way he's going to be able to sustain that, to do both. And then he does it at a high level. You see him on the mound. I mean, he can be a top 5 Cy Young guy. You see him this year, half of his game got taken away because he wasn't able to pitch, and he still goes out and has a 50-50 season. So he still finds a way to leave his mark on the game in a historic way. So in my opinion, I think the big mystery is he going to pitch this postseason? And man, you would think as a competitor that he wants to get in there for an inning or two. I'm not sure where exactly he is with that Tommy John rehab process, but he has the ability to carry teams all the way out through the postseason. And I think the World Baseball Classic was such a good example of that and how he came in to close with Japan, but how he carried them all the way to victory there.
Chatting with Eric Hosmer. I had a Game 1 World Series tonight in L.A., Dodgers, Yankees. Check out Eric's podcast, the Diggin Deep podcast. You mentioned 50-50 this year, like stolen bases. He almost got to 60, which is wild. He hasn't been on base a ton because he just seems to hit home runs. He just trots the bases. He doesn't really have to run them much because of the power that he's producing here early in the playoffs or throughout the playoffs. But what would you anticipate his game plan to be? And if you're Aaron Boone, if you're the Yankees, and he gets on base tonight. Let's say he leads off, bottom of the first, he gets on first. Like, do you expect him to be jumping? Do you think he sets a tone early? How much of that base stealing will apply in the World Series for Ohtani?
Yeah, I think he'll be ready to roll. And that to me was the difference in lineups. When you look at the Dodgers, you look at one guy in the lineup who you don't want to beat you, and you circle that guy, and that's Ohtani. And he's got Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman protecting him, hitting behind him. With the Yankees, that's Aaron Judge. And now, up until Giancarlo Stanton got red hot, there really wasn't much protection for Aaron Judge. So that's where you see the difference in lineup, and that's where you don't want to run the bases too much because you don't want to leave a base open for them to be able to pitch around somebody. But that's the beauty of the Dodgers lineup, is them having Shohei Ohtani right at the leadoff spot. So if you want to pitch around them, you're going to have the leadoff guy on with Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman to follow. So it's pick your poison at that point. There's not much you can do. And the fact that Shohei can run, he's athletic, it's just you don't really know how to attack him.
Eric, of the two managers in this series, is there one do you think needs to be more aggressive with the moves he makes with players or pitchers to kind of get, try to get a little bit of an advantage?
Yeah, so for my opinion, that would be Dave Roberts, because Aaron Boone has Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon. He's got starters. He's going to try and ride those starters out as long as he can and then go to the bullpen. I think Dave Roberts is going to have to be a little more creative with his pitching. His starters aren't as strong as those guys, in my opinion, so he's going to really have to mix and match those matchups in the bullpen at an early, we're talking about 4th, 5th inning, because in my opinion, none of those starters for the Dodgers have the ability to go 6 or 7 innings this series, to where Rodon and Garrett Cole can very easily go 6 or 7.
With Eric Hosmer, Aaron Boone has taken a beating in New York for years, man. He is just constantly the whipping boy there. Like, would this be the ultimate mic drop for a manager if he finds a way to win this? If they get past the Dodgers, they get past Dave Roberts on the other side, like, how gratifying might this be for Aaron Boone if the Yankees win?
Yeah, both managers, in my opinion, but Booney especially, because both these teams, such big market teams, high payroll, big superstars, and the talk before postseason was if both these teams get booted in the first round, that it's not looking good for either manager to return next year. So I think up until this point, both these managers were under mass amounts of pressure, but now they're in the World Series. It's kind of the matchup we all thought was coming. And at this point in time, I think it's just let the boys continue to do what they've done to get you to this spot. But yes, there was a lot of pressure on both managers, and Booney especially. But anytime you're a manager for the New York Yankees, unless you're up 3-0 and getting ready to make that final out for the World Series, you're always going to be under that type of pressure.
Yeah, no kidding, man. And it's amazing. Like Ohtani and Judge naturally they're taking up the marquee, and they deserve that because of what they've done throughout their careers. Yet, their number 2 guys, Mookie Betts in LA and Juan Soto in New York, they've actually won before. Like they actually know what it takes to close here. Like how big of a role would you anticipate both of them to play, and how comforting do you think it will be, Soto in New York and Betts in LA, knowing they've been here, they've done it, and if the big boy doesn't get it done, and Judge in New York or Ohtani in LA, because maybe they get starstruck or what have you, or the bright lights are just too much for them in the World Series, how kind of relieving could that be for both managers, knowing that their number 2 guys have won before and they've proven they could do it in the World Series?
Yeah, that's as a teammate, you're certainly going to lean on those guys, and that's where Shohei is lucky and fortunate to have guys like Mookie and Freddie on his roster, because those guys have been through this run before. They know what it takes. You can count on them to get the big hit. You don't have to feel like it's all got to be coming from your at bat, coming from your swing. You can rely on the next guy. You can really trust that guy. And that's where, Aaron Judge has had it so hard, because he is that superstar that got the Yankees to this point. Giancarlo Stanton has picked him up in a big way. Juan Soto has proven that he's done this before in October at a young age at the highest level. So that's definitely a sense of comfort for both teams and both guys. But I hate to get off topic here, and I certainly want to focus on the World Series, but it's going to be pretty interesting to see what this contract looks like for Juan Soto after what he's done thus far. And if he continues to lead the Yankees to a World Series, it's going to be pretty fun offseason to watch that go down.
Man,
you think it's automatic he stays with the Yankees?
Man, I mean, when you think about legacy and where he wants to be, I could not see him in a different uniform to this point for the rest of his career. To me, I don't see a way of the Yankees letting him go. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of owners out there that are hungry to win. The Mets owner being one, Mr. Steve Cohen. So this could become a bidding war. And if it becomes a bidding war with Mr. Cohen, I don't think many people can win that.
That's the truth, man. Like, if it's simply you got to pay the top dollar, like, it could get out of control, because I was reading, or I heard someone suggest that, people are doing the math on this and what it's going to look like. Like, it could be 600 million, 650. Like, it may push up on Ohtani type numbers, because he's younger than Ohtani.
He just turned 26 years old. When you look at kind of the history of where the market is and how the contracts work, especially him having Scott Boras, you would think he's going to try and get paid till he's 40 years old. The highest AAV someone has right now is around 43, 44. So that's just quick math right there. You're sitting at about 650, close to 700. And he keeps doing big swings like he had in Cleveland. That price tag is just going to keep going up and up and up.
No kid, man. I'm surprised Scott Boras didn't run the bases with him in the 10th inning.
Hayes, you're forgetting one team. You're forgetting one team that wants to get in on this.
Who's that?
Blue Jays.
Oh, yes, the Jays.
Here we go.
Come on, Eric. You know they might be involved in that.
But there was rumors that Shohei Ohtani landed a plane in Toronto last year, and everyone thought that deal was going to get done. So they can certainly be a player in this.
Yeah, I swear we didn't get duped, man. We were live on our show tracking a plane. The guy wasn't even on it.
We looked so stupid. We were like, the plane's landed. He's here, man, and he wasn't there.
Yeah, we got catfished by a plane, man. It was.
Hey, but that tells you,
cool
as a fan, they can be in the Soto running. So there's the positive outlook on that situation.
I guess you're right, man. If it's a bidding war, listen, the company that owns the Jays, they got as much money, if not more, than anybody else. But it's just a matter of whether they're willing to spend it. And like, as a player yourself, and you make good money, and a lot of guys in this generation have made pretty good money. How do you react to hearing that type of number, 600, 650, $700 million?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy amount of money. But when you think about it, our game is fortunate enough to not have a salary cap. And the money that these guys bring in, I mean, Ohtani alone, just think about how much money he's made the Dodgers organization off the field with endorsements, marketing, that whole kind of thing. So, I mean, it's a realistic number when you think of it at the end of the day. And the funny thing is, as players, not funny, but you have a due diligence, and then with the Players Association, you want to set the market for other guys, and you want to really, establish a market to where other guys can make top dollar as well. Now, you certainly will sacrifice some money if it means staying in New York, staying with the Yankees, and becoming a legacy, or that becoming your legacy as a New York Yankee. But at the end of the day, how much are you willing to sacrifice that? Because there's so much that goes into this stuff, and you certainly want to set the market well for other guys that follow.
No kidding, man. And that's going to happen. I mean, Soto's going to get paid, and if he plays well and they win a World Series, think about how much the Yankees are going to make off that. If the Dodgers win the World Series, they're going to make a fortune.
Yes.
These teams they make so much money. The tickets are so crazily priced. It's wild what's going on in baseball. And it starts tonight, Game 1 of the World Series. He is longtime MLBer, World Series winner, host of the Diggin Deep podcast, Eric Hosmer. It's always great catching up with you, man. We really appreciate you doing this. Enjoy the World Series.
Likewise, fellas. Appreciate you having me on.
You got it. There he is, Eric Hosmer. He's awesome, and he knows what it takes, man. And he's been in those negotiations. He got paid a lot of money when he went to the Padres. He got paid, and yeah, this Soto deal is just going to get ridiculous.
And he talked about off the field, just think of something simple as even if the Leafs or Edmonton Oilers, how popular, people want hoodies. Just think of how many hoodies would be sold of just people wanting the Dodgers World Series champions. Mm-hmm. Every fan and their brother would want that hoodie for $65.
Remember when the Raptors won? Everybody in the city had something Raptors.
Yeah, the hat,
everybody.
that championship hat. You saw everybody have that hat the next 5 years.
Yes, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
The same thing happened to the Argos?
Yeah, I think so. They got the Elks tonight. Watch yourselves, buddy. They're the hottest team in the CFL right now, and Chad Kelly's coming to do some serious damage.
So big game.
Don't get cheeky out there, man. The Argos they're chugging. I like
in Edmonton.
Yeah, they're playing the Elks tonight. Yeah. I believe it's tonight, isn't it? Or it's this weekend they play Edmonton.
Yeah, I think it's tonight. 5:30 Eastern time.
Big game. Big game for both teams, the Elks and the Argos. And I was going through pictures actually last night with my daughter when I had a newborn when the Raptors were going on their run, and we had onesies, We the Champs onesies. I had a T-shirt for my older kid. I actually was literally going through that last night. Oh yeah, I bought them a bunch of championship merch. Kids
it's so much fun.
Getting merch.
It's so
the
much
best.
fun.
It was such a fun
me and
run.
Hayes we have a bond forever because I was at my wife's. Me and my wife were dating at the time, and I was at her condo, and she didn't have a TV, and I had to FaceTime Hayes.
Oh boy!
To watch the last 10 seconds of the game to see the Raptors win the championship. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? I couldn't. I couldn't watch it, so I'm I need to see this end. And I had to face it, and he was like, come on, man. He got off his couch and was pointing his phone at the TV.
Yeah, that's exactly what was going on. My kids were asleep. I'm like, be quiet, man. Do not wake my kids up. I'll snap. And that's how we brought in the championship together. Because the game was
so
a
much
Golden
fun,
State.
The
awesome.
whole country embraced it, right?
Yeah.
Everyone embraced that team. We all were cheering for them.
Yeah, it was an awesome run. And,
so much fun.
That was
Kawhi
5 years
hits
ago.
that shot.
5 years ago.
So good.
I know. I'm not sure Kawhi's played a game since. I don't know if he's technically played a game. He might have. Maybe he mixed in a few in L.A. All right, Mike Johnson, in about 15 minutes. Strutter Dud is coming. The oven is currently being warmed. It is heating up as we speak. We'll get to that at 5:30. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Mike Johnson coming up in about 10 minutes, coming off the Leaf games where Johnny called both of them. You're on the panel for both, Columbus and the Blues. It's a tough back-to-back. Wasn't good. Leafs didn't play well.
Dude, I can always tell people, I was an offensive player. I played with some amazing Hall of Fame talent-type players. I love breaking down power play goals off the rush, little skill plays that maybe if you're watching you didn't get to see it at the first glance. I hate doing the panel for those games. I feel like Charles Barkley every time where he's like, I didn't watch that one. I didn't watch the game. Like, he will literally go on TV and say, I did not watch the game that we're doing right now.
It was such a bad game.
Yeah.
I couldn't subject myself to it.
Yeah. I just hate those games. And we do 26 of them a year. I'm like, there's only so many you can take. You're like, we don't get that many games. And I know every game is not a game of perfect, but it's not a ton of fun, man. It's just like, there's a breakdown there, and from every single guy, there wasn't a whole lot the last two.
Two
right?
games in a row, there wasn't much. Really
not much there, man.
Yeah, it hurts. It stings. It wasn't a good week. Let's call it. I mean, listen, against Tampa it was good. The last two games have not been good. Haven't been good for the Leafs. But they're back in action tomorrow night. And the Oilers are in action tonight with Sid in town. Sid versus McDavid. We'll get into that more into the next hour. Mike Johnson will join us. Strutter Dud is coming up. Jason Strudwick in here. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app.